Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friday Night Live. Um, I'll get straight on with the questions tonight. There's not a huge number of them, so I can have an early finish. First one, yikes. I'm the first one to ask a question. Well, I just finished your book, most useful book I believe I have ever read in my life. Thank you. Day 25 for me, which is huge. Always I'm feeling much more clear-headed. And I'm also finding that many activities I used to do, I no longer enjoy. I could sit for hours at the fire with Rob happily whilst drinking. I detest the fire now. Example, I don't like hanging out with him even now. This worries me. My feelings about what I want, etc., are changing. Is that normal, or does my brain rewiring? Sorry for the long question. So this, I kind of, I divide things up into sort of two different camps. The things that you do purely because alcohol's involved, and the things that you do that are enjoyable anyway and happen to have alcohol involved. And when you quit drinking, you'll probably find things fall into one camp or the other. Some people will find a lot of things fall into one camp. Some people might find a lot falls into the other camp. But what you will find is there will be things that you used to do purely because there was alcohol involved, and it wasn't really about the event, it was about the drinking. So when you remove the drinking, um, they're very boring and dull and you don't want to do them anymore. I would quite happily, when I was drinking, just sit in front of the TV and just channel surf and just find something to watch. I can't do that anymore. I just find it boring, frustrating. I find most of the things on TV incredibly dull and uninteresting. And what I realise now is it wasn't really the TV. The TV was just the side action. What I was really wanting to do is just to have something vaguely on in the background while I was doing my drinking. So I don't do that anymore. But there will be other things that you do that are enjoyable. So you might still find pleasure in meeting friends and things like that. But you do need to have a serious think about what is enjoyable and what isn't enjoyable. And you will find things changing. I don't think it's your brain rewiring at all. I just think I've referred to drinking many times as like taking a stupid pill. It's a sedative, it's a depressant, it dulls everything down. You know, you can sit there half comatose of an evening on the sofa, and there could be anything on TV, it really doesn't matter. You've just stupid yourself up. It's the same sometimes as just going to the pub. Drink people when they're drinking, they may be all right for the first hour or so, but they very quickly become extremely irritating. They repeat themselves. They think they're funny when they're not. They become completely self-obsessed. If you watch people when they're drinking, they become very interested in what they have to tell you, but they care not one iota for what you have to tell them. It's a really strange dynamic when people are drinking. It's not particularly enjoyable to socialize in that, unless of course you've taken a drug to stupefy yourself so you don't really understand what's going on and you can just sit there blathering away while nobody's paying them any attention to you at all. And you know, you think that's socializing. So things do change dramatically. So I would say just think carefully about the things that you do that are fun, and things that you do that aren't fun. um, and you may find, like many of us do, you need some new pastimes and hobbies to fill your time up, because when you're drinking, you spend a lot of time either drinking or recovering from the effects of drinking. When you stop, you suddenly have a whole lot more time. But of course, you also have a huge amount more energy because you're sleeping better, and your heart rate isn't falsely accelerated. So that gives you a lot more energy. So I think you're doing fantastically on day 25. It's obviously very positive. And now look for some fun and exciting things to do. And I suppose sitting for hours, you know, what was it you said about by the fire? Yeah, it's not going to be the most interesting thing in the world unless you've got a drug to stupefy yourself. Next question. Someone brought up long-term effects recently, whether you have any knowledge or opinion on the effects of chronic long-term use on the brain and whether a person can effectively heal after quitting. I don't know if they mean to go back to non-alcohol touched brain, but their concern was a brain without alcohol can still be a damaged, unhappy brain for life if they've been drinking heavily and long enough. My related question would be, my brother started drinking as a teenager, so I surmise that his brain literally developed differently and with a dependency upon alcohol because his brain was still in its formative years. I don't know how he's doing now in his late 40s since I had to establish boundaries with him, but it's a curiosity. If you don't know, any reference to any other book would be helpful. So I read something the other day about how drinking, and particularly binge drinking, is quite damaging for the brain, but particularly how the brain develops. So if you start binge drinking as a teenager, it changes the way your brain develops. So I started binge drinking when I was 14. And I don't think I missed a single week. Every, at least once, probably twice a week, I would go out and get as drunk as I could possibly get. And so I think if it has affected my brain's development, I've kind of survived it, and I do a job now that requires my brain and I use it fairly well. So it's obviously not that badly damaged from it. But I think where you're maybe misunderstanding things, a brain without alcohol can still be a damaged, unhappy brain for life. And I think what you're asking about is dependency. So his brain literally developed differently and with a dependency upon alcohol. So the answer is absolutely not. You can't suffer from a lifelong addiction to alcohol. I mean, as I say, I was binge drinking for years, right through probably the time when my brain was developing at its absolute most, and I quit absolutely fine. It may or may not change the development of your brain, but the fact of the matter is it's a conscious decision. It's wanting something that makes you keep going back to it. And if you stop wanting it, which for many of us is about changing our beliefs about alcohol, then to all intents and purposes, you solve the problem. When you're talking about a damaged, unhappy brain, that's a completely separate issue. Because a lot of people, so I've said this many times, a lot of people quit drinking and that's the only problem they had, when as in the reason for their depression. So when you drink alcohol, it interferes with the chemical balance in your brain, which can cause you to be depressed and anxious. It ruins your sleep, which has another massive effect on your mental health, almost an unknown effect. We don't really understand the long-term effect of sleep deprivation. And of course, the other thing it does is erode your fitness, and your fitness and strength feeds directly into your resilience and self-confidence. So 3 massive reasons why it can make you be very unhappy and cause you mental health issues. So for a lot of people, what they find is they quit drinking and their brain chemistry goes back to normal, their heart rate returns back to normal, and they start getting a bit fitter and they start sleeping properly. They've got more energy. Everything kind of falls into place. And that was their issue. I've known many people who are on tablets for antidepressant tablets, and they quit drinking and they no longer need the medication. Alcohol was the thing that was causing the problem. That's not true for everyone. Some people do have genuine mental health issues, but drinking's never the answer to them. The thing to do is to stop drinking. I shine a light on the actual issue itself, because you can't really identify what the problem is when you're constantly swinging between being sedated and then being oversensitized, and then try and put some work in to try and sort that out. The next one's an interesting one. Why do people post up pictures of their alcoholic drinks on social media and WhatsApp? This seems like a new thing people do. So I do cover this off in Alcohol Explained too. I think there's a whole chapter on it. It's not necessarily a new thing people do, because this sort of thing has been around with us for years, but in a slightly different format. Have a look online at some of the authors or film stars from 50, 60, 70 years ago. I mean, if you Google a picture of Ian Fleming, for example, who wrote James Bond, he's there with his cigarette holder and clouds of smoke around him. And that used to be the big thing in, like the 40s, 50s. People, even the 60s, people would have their cigarettes with them. So people like to portray a certain self-image. Okay, so we like to portray ourselves in a certain way. And a fantastic way of being able to portray yourself in a certain way is on social media. So pictures. I think I mentioned this the other day, people post these perfect life images of themselves saying, look at us, aren't we great? And I've done it myself. You put a picture there of, and I've used the example before, when post a picture of me and the family on Christmas Day, all smiles and everything, and people think, oh wow, what a perfect life you have. And of course, that's a split second out of a 24-hour day. The remaining 23 hours, 59 minutes and 58 seconds of which we were all rowing and angry and shouting at each other and having arguments. So people are very, very good at putting these images there that portray this perfect situation, when of course it's absolutely false. People do post pictures of themselves, with their in the pub garden or on holiday or whatever it is with these fancy drinks. How many people post pictures of themselves lying there at 4 a.m, riddled with anxiety, unable to get back to sleep? None that I've seen, but that's actually the reality of drinking. Another reason for this is people are incredibly protective of their drugs, okay, be it smoking or drinking. The usual thing you get when you start talking to people about their personal drinking is they'll start justifying it. Oh, I don't drink this much, or I only do it on this occasion, or it helps me relax, or it does this, whatever it is. They're very, very protective of it. They don't like to be questioned about it. So what another way of doing this for them is they portray this image of themselves. So, they portray the fun side of it. So you get these pictures of them out with their friends or out in these lovely situations with the glass of whatever it is. But it's just a way of putting a nice spin on what is a deeply unpleasant thing. In the same way, back in the 50s, all the publicity shots of the authors and the film stars all had them smoking cigarettes. It was seen as kind of glamorous and a bit dangerous and whatever it was. And it's similar like that with alcohol now. Hi, William Porter. I'd like to ask you if you've done any research into and what your thoughts and opinions are on using CBD in the early stages of sobriety to help calm any anxiety or stresses one may have. Also, for the same calming effects, to use CBD as a sleep aid, and as extension to the sleep question, the same asked regarding melatonin. I don't know anything about melatonin at all. I think if these things work, then that's absolutely fine, particularly in the short term. So the question is it worth using it in the short term to help calm any anxiety or stresses? My answer to that would be yes, but in the very short term, for those 2 or 3 days where there is that chemical imbalance and where you're feeling anxious, not because there's anything to be anxious about, but purely because of the after effects of the previous drinking, that chemical imbalance that's been caused by the previous dose of the drug. What I think is the problem with it is you can sometimes start to use it too often, because life does have stresses and strains in it. And you need to be able to deal with anxiety without resorting to whatever drug it is, be it CBD. And I appreciate it's not a particularly problematic thing. But I think in as far as possible, certainly I found living a natural life without taking drugs is usually the best way, because all of these things, while they seem to have short-term benefits, they generally have long-term issues with them, mainly because all of these drugs, your brain tries to kind of counter the effects of them, so that then when the drug wears off, you need another dose to feel normal. I sometimes think of it like those, the memory foam mattresses where you lie on them and you kind of, over time, it creates like a perfect impression of your body on it. It's kind of what you do when you take a drug. You take it and it may give you like an initial different feeling, but as it sinks in and becomes normal, your brain just incorporates it, and then you need to fill that gap just to feel normal. And I know they don't all work that way, but many of them do. So I think, yes, if you're in the first few days and you've got that chemical imbalance, it might well be worth trying to take something to try and sleep, but I would shy away from trying to do it long term. Do you think the drink industry and Treasury should pay to help people with drinking? It's highly addictive poison. Yeah, I mean, I suppose in a way they do, because there is a lot of publicly funded help available out there through the medical profession and various charities that are funded partly by the government handouts. And of course, the drink industry itself does pay tax. I mean, you can't get away from that. It pays corporation tax, but alcoholic drinks are also heavily taxed as well. So there's already a lot of money going in. And I suppose it's difficult because that money is all coming from the drinkers themselves. So it's kind of circular, because you buy a drink and a big chunk of it goes to the government, and they then put some money back in to help you recover from the effects of drinking it in the first place. So yeah, I mean, it's a nice idea, I suppose. It does happen to a degree. But I think what people forget is at the end of the day, and it's easy to blame the drink industry, alcohol is legally available. So you can't necessarily blame companies for selling it. It's what they do. And so it is slightly different. I do appreciate some of their advertising techniques might be open to a bit more moral questioning. Hi, William Porter. I'm on day 23. I've been doing okay up until day 20 when I've suddenly hit a low. I'm not sure how to deal with pause, which is post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Been reading up on it, and I think this may be why I'm feeling like this. Any advice would be great. So I'm kind of, jury's out on pause. As I say, pause is post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And the idea is that you go through a withdrawal and then you come out the other side and everything's fine. And then it's very vague, but kind of further down the line, you start to hit periods of depression and anxiety, almost as if you're withdrawing again. The reason people have a difficulty with it is because it's incredibly vague. The time period is anything from a few weeks to a few months. And I've even heard people say years. And of course, the symptoms are incredibly vague as well. So it's, anxiety and insomnia and depression and all the rest of it. So these things can be caused by many, many things. What I would say is when you stop drinking, life is immeasurably better, because you're not poisoning yourself. You're not interfering with the chemical balance in your brain. And, whether you have an underlying health issue or you don't, drinking only exacerbates it. It just makes it worse and worse. You start sleeping properly. And again, whether you've got a mental health issue or not, you just find things improve massively because you are getting decent quality sleep. The problem is, though, that despite all these benefits, it's still life and it has its ups and downs. And most people go through low periods at some point. I don't know anyone who doesn't go through, you don't have to have like a mental health issue. It's just human life. Things can be going well, but you can just feel really awful at times. Sometimes there is an identifiable issue, like, I don't know, a relative's ill, or you're worried about a bill, or work's getting you down or something. But other times there's nothing apparent that's causing you to feel low. And I think there is a tendency, we do like to see the reasons for things. We like to think that we're in control. So we like to constantly be finding reasons for things. I think sometimes you do have to accept that sometimes you don't feel right. It might not be to do with alcohol. If you're a few months down the line, it might not be that. It might just be, as I say, life's ups and downs. It might not be. I'm not saying it isn't the case, but I know a lot of people who haven't suffered from post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and it's difficult when the symptoms are so incredibly vague. Any advice? So there's not much you can do. I mean, I personally find exercise really good. If I'm feeling low, exercise usually helps, sometimes very slightly, sometimes a huge amount. It's very rare for it not to help at all, although that does happen sometimes. But the other good thing with exercise is it helps you sleep. So if you're feeling a bit low, if nothing else, you can just switch off and go to sleep. The other thing, of course, I think is really good is, and this is why we use alcohol, it takes our mind off our problems a lot of the time by sedating us. But actually, there are other ways to take your mind off your problems. So it depends very much on the individual. But I like losing myself in a book or a story. I love reading. And I find even when I'm desperately worried about something, if I can sit down with a really good book, I'm not solving the problem, but I'm at least turning my mind off it, because for a few minutes or hours, however long I'm reading for, I'm not thinking about those problems, which I think is really soothing to the brain anyway. Now, you might not be big on reading, but other things you can do, like watching a film or talking to friends or some exercise, because I find when I'm exercising as well, I kind of almost go into some weird meditation thing where I'm not really thinking about anything. But people go back to hobbies they used to have before they started drinking. Some people buy those adult colouring in books and colour them in. And again, it's just, jigsaw puzzles. It may sound silly, but what you're doing is you're concentrating on something that isn't allowing any brain power to be worrying or ruminating over whatever problems you're worrying about. And that's what you should be doing. And as I say, like, jigsaw puzzles or computer games or books or films or talking to friends, anything. And sometimes I find actually, it may sound a bit weird, but work can help as well. Because if things aren't going well, unless work's causing the problem, to just sit down and start concentrating on something at work, you're at least taking your mind off things. So these are all ways of, this is what alcohol does to us. It sedates us. So it takes our mind off our problems by just anesthetizing them. But there's other much, much more healthy ways of doing that. And if you've spent years and years drinking, it's a learning curve to be able to do that. So it takes a bit of time, but it's so worth doing. And that's what I would say there is try and find those things that you enjoy doing that just take your mind off things. You see people, so many adults playing that like Candy Crush saga. But actually, what, if you're engaged in something and switching off from all the other things that are causing you worry, why not do it for half an hour and give your brain a bit of a rest? Oh, right. So is it possible within the group admin settings to set up a tab for past live videos? I know they're under announcements and on your YouTube channel, but when referring new member questions over, I thought it might be easier for them to find them. There is a way, I think, if you're on a laptop or desktop version of Facebook, to go to media and the videos are all in there, but they're mixed up with everyone's videos on the group. So I don't think there is an easy way of doing that. YouTube channel is probably the easiest way because it's just those and nothing else. Hi, William. What can you do with someone close who still continues to drink non-stop, destructing their family life around them? I've ordered and sent them your book and they keep saying they will read it. 2 weeks later, they still say they will read it and they haven't even attempted it. It's so sad as they are destructing their life and their family they have close around them, Rouse, etc. They don't do social media, so I can't even suggest this group or others to look at. So, I mean, it is a bit of a case of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. They have to want to take that step. And that includes, like, for example, here is opening a book and reading it. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous, in the big book, they recommend talking to people. They say never to speak to someone when they're drinking, get them the following day, which is kind of a bit insidious because, as you know, when you hit someone the following day, they're at their lowest mentally. Because, so I probably say this every week, but I think you can't probably mention it enough, but alcohol is a sedative. So when you drink it, it sedates, it inhibits nerve activity. But your brain reacts to that by becoming hypersensitive. So it can work under the sedating effects of the alcohol. So when the alcohol wears off, there's a corresponding feeling of anxiety. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Whatever relaxing feeling you get from an alcoholic drink, you get a corresponding feeling of anxiety when it wears off. Nice and simple. But the problem is, as you drink more and more over the years, your brain becomes increasingly proficient at countering the effects of the alcohol. And as your brain becomes increasingly proficient at countering the effects of the alcohol, a few things happen. Firstly, you need more alcohol to get the same effect. So whatever nice, woolly, relaxed feeling you got from a drink on year one, you're going to be needing to drink 3, 4, 5, 6 times as that years down the line to get that same effect. The second effect, of course, is the more hypersensitive your brain becomes, the more the anxiety when it wears off. So as the years go by, you become increasingly, the withdrawal becomes worse. The third thing, of course, is tolerance. That is what tolerance is. That's why people can drink more and more as the years go by. It's just their brain's becoming more and more proficient. So when people are drinking heavily, when they wake up the following morning, the withdrawal's at its worst. So they're feeling most afraid and anxious. That is the time they're most likely to be worrying about their drinking, because they'll be worrying about everything, because that chemical imbalance makes you worry about everything. Okay, the hungover mind will always focus in on the most disturbing part of any panorama and just focus on that one horrible piece of it. And that's what people do with their lives when they've been drinking. They just search for anything and everything to cause them worry. It's kind of a bit of a vicious circle. So the only advice I can really give is, on the one hand, you can't force someone to either stop drinking or read a book, but talking to them first thing in the morning is probably the time when you're most likely to get them to agree that this is not healthy, this is not right, and they need to take some steps to do something about it. So that would be the one thing. The other thing I would say is it can sometimes help if you don't give them the book as in this is to help you stop drinking, but rather this is some information around alcohol which you probably need to get so that you can try and sort yourself out. But that's how I would give it to them, not read this and quit drinking, but just read it. You know, get this information inside of you and then just reassess after that. But no, it is incredibly difficult. The next question is not being able to stop again and putting it off. So again, it kind of goes to what I was talking about before. There's a lot of preparation you can do with stopping drinking. I think I've said it many times, but one of the reasons alcohol is so hard to quit is because of our beliefs about it. We believe it helps us relax, it helps us cope with stress, it helps us socialize, it helps us sleep, helps us deal with life, it helps us celebrate and commiserate. It's all rubbish. And when you, for me and for many other people, it's about reversing those beliefs, realizing that actually it causes anxiety, it ruins your sleep, it robs you of energy, it spoils social occasions, etc., etc., etc. So you can do all this preparation and you can, visualize going out and all the rest of it. But I think you do have to accept that at the end of the day, there is a point where you have to grit your teeth and just go for it. Okay. And it's, you can have all these words of encouragement and you can have all this preparation and all the rest of it. But at some point, you've got to go for it. You've got to jump. You've got to grit your teeth and just not drink. And you might find it difficult, but you have to do it. I'm not sure there's much more I can say. The one thing I think that fills me, and I know a few other people with horror, one of the things I quite often get with it is I wish I'd done this years ago. And that is one thing I would say if you're kind of thinking I should stop, but I don't want to, I'm going to put it off a bit, is when you're drinking, you're eroding that chemical balance, as I said, and that makes you anxious and afraid. So imagine all of life's problems come in, they're marked out of 10. 1 out of 10 is the really simple things, like you've got to go online and pay a bill or something, or, there's a bit of housework needs doing, more of an irritant. And the 10 out of 10s are your partner dies or your child dies or you get diagnosed with a terminal illness or, the big things, the real big things. And there's all the problems in between. Okay. When you are not drinking, you may find that you can deal with obviously the 1s, the 2s, the 3s or 4s, 5s, 6s, even 7s, you can deal with quite easily. When you're drinking, everything becomes too much effort. The chemical imbalance issue, the lack of sleep, the tiredness, it just robs you of your mental resilience. So you can't deal with the 7s, the 6s, the 5s, the 4s, even the 3s. It all becomes too much. When you're drinking, everything just derails you. You just can't handle it. And that's why alcohol becomes so important to so many people. It's because it causes this inability to be able to cope with life. And then partially returns it. So for people who are drinking heavily in the evenings, all day, everything's unpleasant and too much effort. And the only time they get back to normal, where they feel fairly resilient, is when they're anesthetizing that withdrawal or correcting that chemical imbalance when they're drinking in the evening. So life is not pleasant. It ruins your sleep. So what happens with alcohol is sleep isn't just about going unconscious and falling unconscious for a few hours. You go through different sleep cycles. And one of the main differentiating factors in the sleep cycles is how deeply unconscious you are. So there's deep sleep where you're very deeply unconscious. And then there's something called REM sleep where your brain lights up almost as if you're fully conscious. and that's where you dream. Nobody really knows much about REM sleep, but it's crucial. When people they've done tests where they've robbed people of REM sleep, they've monitored them, and when they start to go into REM sleep, they wake them up. Now, one of the problems with the trials is people become so upset and depressed, they walk out on the trials. Very few people can go through it. And one of the strange things is, and people find this when they stop drinking, when the test ends and then they let people sleep, they get huge amounts of REM sleep. Their brain gluts on it. It's that important. So we don't really know what it does. But the problem is when you're drinking, for the first part of the night, you're too heavily sedated to go into REM sleep. Most people have six or seven cycles of REM sleep in a night. When you're drinking, you typically only have one or two. So it's a massive difference in your REM sleep. The chemical imbalance caused by the alcohol stops you getting going through this crucial sleep cycle. And then, of course, after about 5 hours, that's when the alcohol wears off and the oversensitization kicks in. So you can't sleep at all. It's the equivalent of having like a massive overdose of caffeine. You can't sleep no matter how exhausted you are. The other thing, of course, alcohol does is it increases your heart rate. Now, when you increase your heart rate, your body tells you to sit down and rest. Now, it's usually because you're exercising, but when we take drugs like alcohol that increase our heart rate, we're not doing any exercise. It's just increasing your heart rate, but it makes you feel really lethargic and tired. So forget everything else with alcohol and all the arguments and the money and the hangovers. It does these things. It interferes with your chemical balance in your brain so that everything is difficult. It ruins your sleep, and it makes you feel really heavy and lethargic and lacking in energy. It just destroys your quality of life. And you have to pay through the nose for it. You pay phenomenal amounts of money, hard-earned money. People who will sit there and worry about spending, we go to Tesco's or Sainsbury's and we shop around trying to save a few pound here and there. And then we go and spend 100 quid a week on alcohol or whatever it is. It's absolutely mind-numbing. And all you're spending it on is to feel tired, anxious, and to ruin your quality of life. And the pleasure you get from it is to just anesthetize for a few minutes all the horrible problems it caused in the first place. It's a horrible way of living. And what I would say is, how much more of your life do you want to waste on that? Do you want to waste a day on it, a year? What about a decade? I mean, imagine stop now. And so, like, I'm 45 now. The thought of waking up at 55 and realizing I'd wasted a decade doing that just absolutely makes my blood run cold. So that I would say that, because if you're not going to stop now today, why are you going to stop tomorrow or the next day or the next day? These things do not get easier to stop. Okay. The chemical addiction gets progressively worse, as does the psychological dependency. Okay. It's never easier to stop tomorrow. It's always easiest to stop now, immediately. And as I say, just sit there for a minute and fast forward 10 years. Do you really want to be going through another 10 years of this, spending all your hard-earned money? It just doesn't bear thinking about. Alcohol Explained, Book 1, Chapter 31, page 239, paraphrased. By addressing and thinking through our triggers rather than avoiding them, we can rewire our conscious and subconscious within 3 weeks. Do you think this rewiring can be done in 3 weeks for people that have been drinking 30 plus years? Are binge drinkers rewired quicker than every single day drinkers? If we only deal with a few triggers each day and try to ignore, suppress the rest, how much longer will the rewiring take? I personally don't think it's anything to do with the type of drinker you are, how long you've been drinking for, anything like that. I believe it's purely to do with how much belief you have in this thing. So countering the triggers is when you see, I don't know, like, so here in the UK, lockdown's kind of ending, people are starting to go out, there's people in pub gardens, and so let's say you're walking up the street and you see people in the pub garden and they're all sat there with their beers, and you think, your immediate reaction is, oh, well, that looks nice. But seeing the reality of it is, actually, no, it is not. It's just a carcinogen mixed with a huge amount of refined sugar that I have to spend an awful lot of money on, that will leave me feeling slightly dulled and stupefied before wearing off, leaving a corresponding feeling of anxiety. and will rob me of sleep and make me feel tired and lethargic. Thank God I don't have to do that anymore. Going back to what I was talking about before, that horrible life of the drinker compared to the massive increase in quality of life you get when you quit. Why would you even choose it? And I don't think it's anything to do with how much you're doing it, but how much engaged, how fully engaged you are in it. Annie Grace came up with something quite recently, which I found quite interesting. It's one of those things where experts tell you something and you think, yeah, but that's just common sense. So this expert has come up and said that people are more likely to stick with new habits if they're actually enjoying them. And there's all this data about how things work in your brain and all the rest of it. But actually, you know what they're telling you is if you like something, you like doing something, it's easier to do it. Yes. Well done. That's great. So, and that I think is something probably worth mentioning here. Try to enjoy it. You're improving your life massively and saving loads and loads of money in the process. There's no downside to it at all. So try and enjoy it. And I think that is the thing that probably is going to help you more than anything else. It's not how often you do it or all the rest of it. It's how much pleasure you take in it. And if you're enjoying doing it, it really doesn't matter whether you're only doing it once a week or 100 times a day. Just do it and enjoy it. Just try and enjoy your new life. So the last question is, and it's sort of building on a theme, I guess, why do hangovers seem to get worse the older you get? I did read into this once, and there was all these theories behind it about when you get older. I can't remember what it was. We'd more like to be on medication, all the rest of it. I think there's a few reasons, though. One, I think particularly if you're drinking a lot, as I've mentioned, alcohol increases your heart rate. It makes you feel tired and lethargic, so you're less likely to do exercise. It makes you overeat, so you're more likely to put on weight. But one of the big things it does overall, all of these things, is it erodes your fitness. And of course, if you don't use muscle, you lose them, basically. Your muscle don't just sit there if they're unused. They start to waste away. So if you are drinking regularly, you're going to probably be losing muscle, probably gaining body fat. Your fitness will be eroding because every time you're increasing your heart rate without associated activity, it's the opposite of exercising. It's actually causing you to become unfit. So it's impacting your physical strength, it's impacting your mental resilience. And of course, I've spoken about, it has a massive impact on sleep. Now, sleep doesn't just impact your mental well-being, it impacts your physical well-being. People who sleep less are more likely to have physical disorders, they're more likely to get cancer. And again, this is one of the things the experts have done these studies, and people who sleep less or have disturbed sleep more likely to develop cancer and heart problems and all the rest of it. But again, it's almost common sense, because sleep is when your body and brain regenerates itself. Okay, if you're not sleeping properly, your body self-repairs. It's an amazing thing. But if you're not sleeping properly, you're robbing it of its ability to self-repair. So you're running your body into the ground. So I think it is as simple as that. If you take someone who is very fit and very strong and very well rested, they're going to deal with alcohol a lot better than someone who is very weak, robbed of sleep anyway. And that's what you're talking about. The more years you're drinking for, the weaker you get. So I think it really is as simple as that. I hope that was useful for everyone. Have a good evening, everyone, and have a good weekend. And I shall most likely see you next week.